Welcome to the Sourcing Hero podcast, produced by Una, a group purchasing organization that empowers sourcing heroes, and Art of Procurement, the world's largest procurement podcast network. I'm your host, Kelly Barner. The goal of the Sourcing Hero podcast is to capture the epic stories of people who are rising up and beating the odds to create exceptional value within procurement, directly from those heroes themselves. Today, my guest here on the Sourcing Hero podcast is Keith Wright. Keith is an independent procurement consultant and the author of The Power of Professional Procurement, a book for business and decision makers that are determined to make a material difference in their supply chain. So, hi, Keith. Thanks so much for being with me today.
Pleasure. Lovely to be here, Kelly. Thanks so much.
So I talked a little bit about the fact that you're an independent consultant and also that you've braved the journey of writing a book. What else should people know about your background?
Well, I mean, I've been in the procurement world for 30 years. So I've had a long corporate career, actually, about 27 years of big PLCs. I had a lot of that background work and then transitioned into, effectively running my own consultancy for the last 3 years. So I wouldn't say I've necessarily been there, done it, got the T-shirt in every instance, but I've had a few examples of the good, the bad, and the indifferent of both corporate life and, of course, the really easy task of running your own business as a procurement consultant, because there's never.
Yeah, easy. And for anybody only getting the audio, I feel like I need to add supplementary air quotes. The easy task of running your own business.
Yeah, I've got a slightly mischievous sense of humor. So when I say easy, maybe once a month, it's a little bit easier. But slightly different challenges to the corporate world, that's for sure.
That is true. And going back through that experience, so you talked about nearly 30 years of working in procurement. Your practitioner experience is predominantly in construction, most specifically around building materials. And we all know, whether we're in the industry or not, construction is often looked at as a huge economic indicator, right, of things good and bad. What are some of the macroeconomic tie-ins that you experienced when you worked in the construction industry?
Yeah, well, look, I think it's interesting that probably since COVID, I think people have realized that everything's connected, often on a global world. Even things that you didn't realize had certain components, and suddenly those components became challenging because of, sadly, some conflicts around the world, as well as obviously some global disruption. So I think quickly, hopefully, people started to appreciate that not everything just turns up by magic all the time. Yep. Never any issues, never any challenges. And I think, particularly, I mean, you see it obviously in all sorts of industries, but I think particularly in construction, because those things directly impact A, how quickly you can have a build program, and B, how much those build programs cost. There's a very clear parallel between the availability of materials and of availability at the right price to enable those construction products to happen. And we've seen some absolutely huge extremes over the last 3 to 5 years. Probably in that period more than all of my prior 25 years in construction. It's like, how many things can you do in the space of 2 years? Let's get them all out and see how you procurement and supply chain folk can adapt to this.
And there's certainly been change over time, but in the span of years that you've worked in procurement, you've talked about the fact that you've worked at large corporates. You've also worked for yourself. You've worked in different industries, construction and otherwise. What would you say are some of the commonalities being in procurement across those experiences? And what were maybe some of the key differences that you noticed?
Yeah, I think from a consistency perspective, I think that the professional element of procurement is something that I think is often underrated. Unless you are in procurement and realize the hard yards you put in, day out, getting to understand your supply chain, getting into the detail, knowing your numbers, really understanding all of the different things that genuinely create true value, rather than, can I buy this thing as cheaply as possible? Yeah. And then guess what? You can't get any. So I think, regardless of what industry you're in, a true procurement professional will wear all of these different hats to try and keep all of these things, all these plates spinning, to ultimately ensure that the customer gets what they need when they need it. And yes, of course, there are different, depending on what industry, and there are different things that throw at you. You know, you might have more of a local market in terms of product versus maybe an international market. Therefore, you know, freight may come into it more, global inflation or demand might come into it more. There are always nuances in terms of that. And I suppose ultimately, really, whilst the customer experience is something that us procurement pros are trying to make sure is maximized, different customers in different markets, of course, have different needs. So again, it's been really specific about, to me, building a procurement strategy that's agile enough to deliver against your specific customer needs, because we all know customers are very different across the world, let alone in the different markets that we all serve.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's hard too, because you and I are looking at this from seats sort of within the procurement tent. And so we know the work that has gone into customer experience, like you mentioned, or value beyond cost, or being agile, or being strategic and partnering with suppliers. And yet we continue to hear from people maybe outside that tent at varying distances that they don't perceive procurement very differently. I mean, I haven't been in procurement quite as long as you, but I'm not that far behind. I've seen a ton of change. I experienced sort of the bang the shoe on the table at the supplier days of driving costs down. And now we see relationships and collaborations forming, a recognition that value and supply continuity are critical. But getting that message out, it sort of makes me think of the old, like, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? Do we need to be doing more, not just to change our orientation towards value and collaboration, but to promote that at the same time, so that that message reaches stakeholders and reaches suppliers?
Yeah, I think we should. I mean, it's interesting, everyone knows who the best salesperson is in town. Sales drives an organization, but of course, unless, even in the service business, something has been procured with a really, hopefully, a very good, strong supply chain to underpin the ability of your sales teams or to go and drive into the customer base. So, you can very quickly, and again, we're on the same page here, but you can very quickly see lead indicators that potentially suggest something might be broken, whether it's customer complaints, whether it's inflation that's out of control. You might be losing market share. You might be, seeing certain product categories performing not quite as good as others. And is that because your range process isn't great, or is it because availability is not right? So to me, there's all these sorts of indicators that could lead back to a real need in the organization to think about how procurement is being resourced. And it's not a sexy industry, so to speak, or a sexy profession, and nobody necessarily thinks about it everyone wants to be a marketeer, we're creative, we do all the great stuff for our customers. Yeah, but you've got to buy things really well.
Yeah, you do.
And have a super organized supply chain. Otherwise, you're just going to let your customers down. And that's, I think you're right. I'm super passionate about getting that message out that, it's such an important profession. And it's a profession that lends itself to so many different industries. I was reading something today about someone that's in the travel category management procurement. So it was really interesting.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, I've never been involved in that particular space. So maybe there's a plug. Maybe there's a customer out there waiting for me. But I thought it's the same principle, isn't it? Like, do it well, do it organized, and do it with purpose. So a long-winded answer to that. But I'm all pro get procurement on the map, and the importance of us as a function to not just underpin customer service, but to actually drive it and innovate and put businesses into the future.
Now, when you and I had talked previously, we did discuss a little bit your transition from working corporate to being an entrepreneur and what it requires, other than a healthy dose of insanity, to be successful working for yourself. You had talked about the importance of self-investment, or investing in yourself. I'd love to have you talk a little bit about what that means to you. So what does it look like? What do you do to invest in yourself?
Yeah, I think one of the early observations when I left my corporate job was suddenly you go from having all these different people on your side, on your team, helping you, challenging you, conversations, to suddenly, in my case, I was kind of on my own. Yes, I still had a network, but actually the network of the businesses I was in, of course, isn't there. I
Yes.
don't talk to all the different functions. So I think there was firstly getting to know lots of things that I knew a bit about, but didn't necessarily ever confess I was an expert. So getting a good accountant and working out the finances in a different way to the sort of thing I did in procurement. But how do you get involved in your own marketing, your own social media? A lot of that dynamic around the business development side of it, I had to learn and go far deeper in it. And then, of course, you decide, am I better off outsourcing some of those things rather than trying to do it all yourself? Yeah. But I think there was a personal development thing, which was surrounding yourself with really good people that have either been on the journey or are on the journey, that are ahead of you, could be, years ahead of you or decades ahead of you. And therefore, having a really good coach that could point me in the direction of things that I knew were gaps that I didn't have the necessarily skill set or appreciation of. But also, I think surrounding myself, in this case, with entrepreneurs that were building businesses, that were thinking about all these different ways of how they could ultimately grow their business and serve their customers. So it was that side that, having kind of made up my first year of not really knowing what I was doing. Yeah. Year 2 was about, right, let's put some rules and structures and personal development investments in to continue to then grow me as an individual and as a business person, and then also the business itself.
And one of the pieces of that, you talked about sort of building a network or an ecosystem around you and the importance of that. I think that's an area of development that can very much apply back to somebody still in a corporate position, not just in the sense of knowing who to go to if you're looking to make a change, but even for the sake of bouncing off ideas or figuring out how to talk about things in a way that you can influence others internally, or you can build a sense of authority around yourself. Certainly as somebody who's working as an entrepreneur or a solopreneur, you find that you're instantly in the content creation business, even if it's just through straightforward posts on LinkedIn, for instance. How did you find your voice for that form of marketing? I guess we'll say it's like half networking, half marketing, but try to demonstrate what you know and come across as having authority, but also doing it in a way that invites other people in. What would you say that you've learned about that sort of developing authority on a social platform?
Yeah, I think consistency is massive. So, I never miss a day of posting at all. Even, I always have to balance off holidays, of course. But I think consistently showing up is one thing. Yeah. Not obsessing over the numbers. This day I'll do a post and think that's the best post I've ever written. Nobody reads it. Next day, that took me 2 minutes. Loads of people read. And you think, I'm not even going to waste my energy on working out this week's algorithm for LinkedIn or whichever format you use. So I think just getting comfortable with, I'm sharing for my audience. The bit I found was a really big transition, and it's still, actually every successful person I've sort of followed talks about this, but you just give stuff. You have to give things away. We don't have to. Choose to give things away. So educating. So it's not for me, it's for my audience. So hints, tips, advice, not always, look at me, I'm having a great day. Isn't my business amazing? But today's been really hard, and this is what I've seen. And I'm sharing things that are therefore authentic, because not everyone, funny enough, has rainbows and unicorns in their life every day, even in a corporate job. So I think you just got to show up. I've learned, which I remembered actually back to my school years. I loved reading and writing. I really loved that. I've always been a big avid reader, and so I think getting back to, I really enjoy the process. I love, you can be driving in a car and have some inspiration that, I've got to write about that. I've just seen something that's really, I think it's really cool. I want to share something that I've observed. So I think, just getting into that routine and that habit. And funny enough, the more you give, ultimately the more you get. But it's not about that. It's about give, share, and just keep doing it.
And I do think there's something ironic, and I've experienced the same thing, where in many cases, the best authority or influence is built by making yourself vulnerable. You have to be honest, right? You have to be, as you said, authentic about it. It can't be this, humble brag. I'm the worst, but I'm also the best all at the same time. But anybody that has gone through a significant career change or gone through a layoff or tried to start their own business, It's not all sunshine and rainbows, to your point, but being open about that process in a real way, to me, that's where so many of the connections come from. And I think having those exchanges with people, whether it's 2 or 2,000, that's ultimately what sort of strengthens not just the people that you're connected to, but the whole collective, how you talk about it and how well you understand them. Now, we started the conversation today talking a little bit about macroeconomic change or business change or things tied to types of companies. But people's expectations change too. And whether it's an external customer, if you happen to be an entrepreneur like we are, or if it's an internal customer because you're somebody who still works at corporate, you're probably seeing customer preferences and tendencies change. I'd be interested in your perspective about either some trends or changes that you've observed around customer behavior, and maybe how some of those might be allowed to change procurement strategy to fit them a little better.
Yeah, look, I think what's interesting is I think customers have been changing. I mean, customers change all the time. I think in some cases, customers have been changing far quicker than maybe some business owners either think or are prepared to accept. So, and that's a slightly different answer on the question, but I sort of sit here thinking, take digital and the customer experience, which isn't new. People have been trading digitally for a long, long time. Yet there are, in the space I often work in, building material supply, there are still many, many retailers that have no transactional website, literally none. The website says, "Thanks for visiting. Please ring one of our branches."
And hopefully gives a phone number.
So exactly. Yeah. So you sort of think. I think there's not so much naivety. I just wonder whether there's I don't know. Is there this traditional feeling that, but I'm just going to ignore it, and I'm just going to pretend that these things aren't happening around me. And I think the danger is for those businesses that customers are ever more demanding. It's like anybody in life. How would you want to be treated? How would you want to shop? How would you want to search things? To me, it's convenience. Now, it doesn't mean to say you need to have every single thing every single day available on every single platform, because that might not be what your customer wants, which we spoke about before. But you need to really understand, what is your customer telling you? How do they want to be talked to? How do they want to think about things? How do you want to be interacted with them? And make yourself, to me, as convenient as possible to serve the widest range of needs of your customer, your target customer base. So it's probably a bigger, and again, I think because the adaptation of that means whether you're selling, stationery or cars or building materials, it doesn't matter. If the principle is, I'm thinking absolutely ruthlessly like my customer, then in theory, you can't really go wrong. You might choose different things, but you can't really go wrong if you've got that real ruthless customer mindset.
And I do think I actually love the word choice of ruthless, because except in unique cases where you're really, really lucky, people are not going to tell you what they want. And a lot of times they're not telling you what they want because they don't know what they want. So it becomes a little bit of a mystery quest, like you said, to get inside someone's head. Think about the interactions that go well. Think about the interactions that don't. Try to pick up little cues and sort of piece it all together, because it is the provider, regardless of industry, size, right, exact approach to a market, that can figure out what that customer wants and serve it better than anybody else. That's really where the endless opportunity comes from. But it is hard, because otherwise we would all I'm just going to get up in the morning and figure out exactly what my customer wants and hand it to them on a silver platter and everybody wins. If only it were that simple, right?
Yeah, but I think what's interesting is you don't necessarily have to be, 10 times better. I think sometimes it's like, it is the power of compound, a little bit better in lots of things, but then really consistently better. Yeah. And never, I've been fortunate, even the last month or so, actually, to work with some businesses that are doing amazingly well, yet they've still called me in to come and have a look at what they're doing. I'm saying, you're going to win, because
that's right.
You're not waiting for it to go pear-shaped, to go, oh my God, I need a consultant to come and help me. I've got leaks coming all over the place. These are businesses saying, I'm humble enough to know the best time to look is when I'm doing really well.
Yeah.
And let's go again. And that's where I think, those are the businesses that are brave, because, and as I said, humble, because they're prepared to take a look at things whilst they don't technically need to. But it's a nice place to be.
Absolutely. And it's another one of those things that whether you're in corporate procurement or sales or marketing, you can also do the same thing. You don't need to wait until everybody is frustrated with procurement or sales have plummeted to reach out to other people and say, hey, we feel pretty good about how we're doing, but there has to be more we could do. What else could we do? That is something that all of us can be proactive about, to sort of not only just do well, but to continue that journey so that we get ahead and stay ahead. As you said, not by multiples of 10x, but just enough to sort of keep the spirit of it going.
Yeah, I think there's a creativity bit. I mean, I wrote about this 12 months ago. Actually, I might repost this. I did something that talked about, in a crisis, when things are tough, I take COVID as an example. People were super creative. They thought about all sorts of different ways to innovate. Then the market got really good. And I almost think everyone got a little bit lazy. I don't want to accuse everyone of being lazy. Oh, we're hitting our numbers. It's brilliant. We're going to smash our targets this year, record years. And then suddenly everything went a bit wobbly, certainly in the UK. 2023 was a really tough year. And suddenly you've gone from selling anything for any price to anyone to, I don't need as many. I need to go and negotiate. I need to go and sell things again and chase orders and be proactive. And I think this mindset shift of, why wouldn't you just always want to be amazing? I don't want to be naive, but why wouldn't you always want to be, even in a good market or bad market, your professional pride to be the best, to always seek out opportunities and be innovative and curious, to go and develop things that are amazing. And I think generally procurement people are, by the way, but I do, it's this interesting paradigm around when life's really difficult, you've got to put a shift in, otherwise you won't have a job. Yet when life's good, you can be a little bit, you get away with a few things. I sound like I'm cracking the whip on people, but it is that principle of just, go and do your best all the time and seek out those opportunities.
No, I actually think that's a great transition. This talking about doing excellent and sort of following on. I want to ask you a little bit about a tradition that we have here at the Sourcing Hero podcast. So I'm going to give you two questions. You can pick either one, and there are no wrong answers. So your choices are, what does the idea of a sourcing hero mean to you? Or to broaden it a bit, what do you think heroism looks like in a business context?
Heroism for a procurement person, or just heroism full stop?
I will let you define that, actually.
Let's go with the second one, and let's take a broad topic. So, to the point perhaps of building on the conversation we just had, I often think there's many unsung heroes in a business, and interestingly, you don't necessarily always see it until, I suppose you've got to look in some cases. It's not always who's got the best numbers and who's the most vocal in a meeting. And often there are people that you don't necessarily see come to the top until either there's a crisis happened, or you just, I don't know, you see a bit of confidence. And someone wrote today about taking action, which I'm a big firm believer in. You take action, you build confidence, and you get momentum sort of building. So I think there's an element here which is, kind of the people that just do a great job because they want to do a great job. They're not necessarily looking to be the next CEO. They're not looking to get, a gold star today. They just have amazing, and they perhaps don't even know how good they are. They just come in and just want to be the best versions of themselves. And they do a brilliant job day in, day out, and they don't need to be told, and they don't necessarily need to have, a massive bonus, and that's what motivates. They're just doing an absolutely brilliant job. I think they are the heroes because they've got that self-motivation, drive, and energy just to go and be amazing.
I think that's an awesome perspective. And it's interesting because we were just talking about, under pressure, you get the best creativity and then things get a little bit better. And so we all, take the Friday off, take the longer lunch, maybe the innovation slumps a little bit. If I think about your definition of hero, those are the people that are steady state all the time, just that much better, sort of self-driven. I think any company would be glad to have anybody that was that consistent and dedicated. I think that's a great way to look at heroism. So Keith, if people have met you for the first time through this conversation, what is the best way for them to connect with you if they want to reach out or if they want to learn more?
Yeah, probably two. If you want to work out what I'm talking about on any given day, LinkedIn. So I don't know the handle. Keith Wright, someone that looks like me, that's on there quite a lot. And then probably the website. So www.kwrightconsultancy.co.uk. There's loads of stuff on there. There's often links to podcasts and articles and things that I've written. There's testimonials, there's resources, there's links to the book, there's links to all sorts on there. So yeah, that's a good sort of holding place that's got lots of things. I am on TikTok. It's not always as corporate as the LinkedIn, but I tend to try and also communicate with different types of audiences, still with a good mix of sort of business and procurement sort of aspects on TikTok too.
Awesome. Well, Keith, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast. Join us again next time for more true stories of sourcing and business heroism performed by your colleagues and peers. Look for the Sourcing Hero wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe. Finally, don't forget, sourcing heroism is taking place all around us every day. Keep your eyes open and you're bound to see it. Until next time, I'm your host, Kelly Barner. Stay well and always remember that you can be a hero too.